So in this video, we're going to talk about a very specific trope for male characters that I've noticed in the last little while here, particularly in adult animation, but this trope also exists elsewhere, particularly in a lot of daytime dramas on television. So this trope is the intelligent, talented, toxic, disconnect, detached man who thrives in his industry but fails to connect with others and is consistently wildly self-destructive in his quest to fill his emotional void with anything but interpersonal relationships, usually substituting this with substance abuse, mostly alcohol. Now, the four characters that inspired me to make this are Don Draper from Mad Men, Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty, Sterling Archer from Archer, and BoJack Horseman from BoJack Horseman. 3 out of the 4 of these are animated, and I think the criticism is most active for Rick and Morty, and I think least apt for BoJack Horseman. And I think Mad Men is probably one of the ones that really makes it very salient in terms of real-world behaviors. So, to be clear, I'm just going to say this off the bat, I am a passionate fan of all 4 of the shows I listed. I've watched all of them all the way through multiple times. I read comics and outside source material and fan theories, and I watch fan videos and things like that. When I am a fan of something, I'm a pretty big fan. I've cosplayed from a couple of these as well. So this is not a criticism of the show. In fact, it's not even a criticism of the writing or the characters. Rather, this is going to be kind of an examination of the fan bases of these shows and the people who interact with these, or how people interpret and interact with these characters in their real lives. So the thing about this trope is usually it is made incredibly obvious by the writers. Usually the toxicity of the character is very blatant. In Rick and Morty in particular, season 3 literally had to spell it out in an episode, but it's always been there, and it's always been very clear from the beginning to anyone who's paying attention that Rick is a toxic character. All 4 of these characters I've listed are anti-heroes in that they are at least a secondary protagonist of their series, and insofar as they do not have the traditional heroic qualities a character would have or the same roles in the story. Rick is almost always very explicitly the villain in a story. When he does do something good, it's usually, at least he puts it as a guise for ulterior motives for some sort of personal gain. And I think that the way that this is made clear is why I'm so puzzled by how people consistently get this trope wrong. I do see at least with BoJack Horseman, and I think part of that is how explicitly other characters call him shitty, but I have actually seen people who don't do the required introspection and simply like to identify the parts of the character that are brash and rude and, you know, say and do whatever they want types. And that's the problem. People appreciate the veneer of these characters. The trope is that these characters are charismatic, but you're not supposed to buy into the charisma. The idea is that they use their charisma, they use their intelligence, they use their talent as a way of, you know, gaining admiration in society, which helps them try to compensate for the lack of emotional depth that they have and the lack of interpersonal relationships that they maintain. I think this is actually most representative in Rick, who's kind of the god version of this character trope, insofar as he takes it to the extreme in that he's the most superior, the most unrelatable, the smartest man in the universe who can invent and do anything. I think putting Rick in that light is actually really meant to continue to subvert the idea of not just male superiority, but superiority and success in general as necessarily being the most important thing for happiness or for having a good life, basically. I think that they also do this a lot with Don Draper, who, you know, they consistently make arcs where he seems to be seeking redemption only to have him fail. And at the end of the series, he ultimately does not really redeem himself. You know, he follows his ex-wife's wishes, but he basically fucks on off out of his children's lives. And I think that failing to see that these characters are harmful and failing to see that they're not supposed to really be the good guys is a big part of some fans' problems. Granted, this is not the majority of fans, because again, this is often not subtext. In these series, this is usually fucking text. You know, it's in the script. People call BoJack toxic. People call Dawn self-destructive. People call Archer selfish and a bully. When you look at these characters, you're supposed to enjoy watching them. You're supposed to appreciate, you know, the fun journey of their shows. But you're also supposed to be critical of them. And when you do identify it with them, the purpose is not to make you proud of identifying with them. The purpose is actually to make you uncomfortable and make you change your behaviors. I think that's why BoJack is probably one of the more subversive on this list in terms of doing that, because it constantly subverts the trope in and of itself by, not making him the most successful, making him successful by a normal person's standards, but within his own industry, he's seen as a failure. He's seen as washed up and unsuccessful. And I think that is really interesting and really salient in terms of how the character is supposed to be interpreted versus how some people do interpret him. But again, I think the smallest number of fans do that with BoJack. I think the largest number of fans probably do that with Rick and with Don Draper. Don Draper in particular inspired a whole weird culture of wanting to bring back the 60s. And for a lot of dudes, they would get their hair cut like him. They would actively try to emulate his behaviors. It was kind of freaky because they missed the entire point of the character. And I think that when you're looking at these characters, it's great to appreciate them. It's great to enjoy these shows. These shows are excellent, and they do a lot in terms of making you be introspective. But if you're not willing to look at those characters introspectively, you are missing the point. You are missing the goal of the show. You are missing the entire subversion of the masculine trope of the hero. And you're missing the point of what an anti-hero protagonist is supposed to make you do, which is question your own behaviors and motives, question your own perspective, and be critical of the perspectives and ideas of others, as well as, appreciating them and trying to understand them. So I know this one was a little bit rambly, but I'm going to post it anyway, and that's all I have for you. Be the sane, bitches.